Spokane Valley could become a sanctuary city of a different
Councilman
kind.
Caleb Collier says that this
I'm proposing that the city of Spokane Valley issue a proclamation stating that our city is a Second Amendment sanctuary city.
Welcome to the fire.
Today on Church and State, the Art of Liberty with Howard Lichman. Hello, Christian Patriots, and welcome to Church and State, where we drive morality and religion over tolerance and apathy. And I'm your host, Caleb Collier, once again, your favorite far-right shock jock, and the show that talks about politics and religion. Jesus Christ is our referee, so it's always nice and clean. Real quick, I'm going to point you to the website, churchandstate.media, so you can do a few things. Number one, register. We want you to get our newsletter as well as a personal phone call from me. So right there's your opportunity, name, phone number, and email. While you're on the website, please check out some of our most recent episodes. Boy, that was a fun one. Is CPAC fake and gay? I think I made some friends on that one, but you're going to want to check that one out, ladies and gentlemen. It's my breakdown of CPAC as I attended it. Also, while you're there, check out some of our featured guests. Of course, my favorite on that is always going to be Dr. Ron Paul, the godfather of the Liberty Movement. But we have some great ones there, and all you have to do to listen to those is click the name. Also, please peruse through some of the great affiliates. We have some wonderful ones on there. And with all of those, if you just use the promo code Church and State, you'll help support us and get some needful things. Also, I want to say, hit the donate button for us, ladies and gentlemen. Keep us on the air. We're part of NRB TV, Prepper Broadcasting Network, Newscaster, so many great platforms that we're on. We're looking to expand, but we need your help to do so. So if you like the conversations, if you like my antics, please hit the donate button and help us keep the lights on. Lastly, if you want to get a hold of us, Church and State 1776 at proton.me. With that, let's go ahead and start this show. Now, I'm very excited about this. I'm bringing on the head of the Art of Liberty Foundation. This is Howard Lichman. He's a visual collaboration-focused technologist and consultant with specialties in organizational and individual productivity. That is quite the mouthful. He's a founder and president of the Human Productivity Lab, and obviously doing a lot here with the Art of Liberty Foundation. Howard, it is a pleasure to have you on Church and State.
You've revealed my secret identity, and so usually I'm the voluntarist author Etienne de la Boissy squared, and I usually go by Etienne de la Boissy. It's not really a secret. When I first wrote my book, Government: The Biggest Scam in History, how intergenerational organized crime runs the government, the media, and academia. Part of what I did in that is I broke down the hidden curriculum of the government school system. My ex-wife had my children in the government school system, and I didn't want them to get any heat for what Dad was doing. And so I started writing under the nom de plume of Etienne de la Boissy squared. And most people know me and know my work through that pen name. Etienne de la Boissy was a French political philosopher. He wrote in the 16th century, and he was really the first one to break down the tricks and techniques that governments use, not just to get obedience, but to get fealty and adoration and God save the Queen and all hail the chief, and to get people to go along with something that isn't in their interest. And so I feel like I took his pen name because I'm doing his work in the modern age, and I'm pulling back the curtain and showing people that, there's like a playbook of how do you slave up a population, how do you run government on them. Think of government as a technique for robbing and controlling a population. And so that's why I took the pen name, and that's the history. But most people would be familiar with me through that, but I'm happy to go by Howard, and we can it's not, like I said, it's not a secret or anything. But that's how you find me on the internet, is Etienne de la Boissy squared with the numeral 2 afterwards, to denote that I'm not the the real one, and also to separate my work from the originals.
So when we originally started communicating, we were emailing, and I was emailing, obviously Howard. But then I did see on the website that you have the two different names. I largely chose Howard Lichman because I'm the type of guy that can ruin the last name Smith. And when I looked at that, I was like, oh, I will butcher that name. So my apologies, but yeah, if you don't mind, I'll just be calling you Howard throughout the interview.
That's fine. It's Bowie C or Bowie T, depending on which Frenchman you ask. But it is from a marketing standpoint, it's probably the worst marketing decision ever because nobody can pronounce it and nobody can spell it if you hear it described. So
that's fair. Yeah, I mean, you could have done Bastiat or something like that. I got that one, but. No worries at all. I want to talk to you about the Art of Liberty Foundation because I've been exploring this website and you have some phenomenal things on here. What made you want to start going after the government scam? What so many people believe that governments are necessary, not even necessary evil. A lot of people just think government as overall is a good thing.
Well, it all starts with Dr. Paul, and so when I was in college, Ron Paul was running for the 1988 presidential candidacy of the Libertarian Party. I had to attend one of his talks against my will. I was supposed to be jet skiing on a lake that day with some friends, and it became a required assignment, and I was mad about it. But once he started talking, I realized, hey, I'd never heard a politician make so much sense. And so I walked out of there and I said, I guess I'm a libertarian. And then as, I ended up working for, one of the big four think tanks in DC where, the libertarian one, where I became, acquainted with the philosophy of liberty, with the economics of the free market. And over time, I became, what's now known as a voluntarist, the idea that all relationships must be voluntary. Nobody has an exception for morality, especially the government. Nobody has rights that other people don't have. And I really, came to an understanding that we really didn't need government. And not only did we not need government, but we would all be dramatically wealthier and more prosperous, and there would be more harmony in society because you wouldn't have to fight, at the like the school board level for control of the school board, where if you lose in California, you get LGBTQ studies forced on your kid. If you lose in Virginia, it could be critical race theory. If you lose in Michigan, it could be Islamic studies. And so, in a voluntarist world, you get to pick whatever kind of education that you want for your kids. And if you want Montessori, you get Montessori. If you want Waldorf, you get Waldorf. If you want vocational training, you get vocational training. And so it's just a better way of organizing society where people can kind of vote with their dollars every time. And if we didn't have this organized crime government and this fractional reserve banking system, then everybody would be dramatically wealthier. And so I think you and I connected originally because we just came out with this study at artofliberty.org/inflation, where we've calculated that the cost of government from the banking system, that the total extraction, including the purchasing power loss to fractional reserve banking, something called the Cantillon effect, the compound trap, the ways that the government and the banks steal the value out of your money, plus the extraction of taxes, plus because they're lying to everybody about Social Security and about the inflation rate. They're going to be stealing. They're stealing. A dramatic amount through underpayments. They're not paying the true cost of living adjustment of Social Security because the Bureau of Labor Statistics is lying about what the inflation rate is, and so the total extraction is over $2.7 million from the average worker. That's a $60K salary for 40 years and then 20 years of retirement. And over that 60-year span, if you really break it down, it's over $2.7 million at 60K. If you're 128, if you're making 120 a year, you're making 250 a year, it goes up proportionally. And I mean, that's a tremendous extraction. And that really is the big scam of government. The big scam of government is that it's the banks on the top, and they've lobbied and bribed the government to give them a monopoly on the creation of currency and credit, and they're using this dishonest monetary system to steal the purchasing power from the average American, and that's transferring to the banks. We in the report, we calculated between 1913 and now between 15 and 25 trillion dollars with a T. And so that's an amazing amount of money, but it doesn't go directly to it. So they have to steal over 300 trillion in the same time period to get the 15 to 25 trillion pure. And we can talk about the mechanism behind that, but like, it's the greatest theft in all of human history has been the theft of the purchasing power of the American people between 1913 and today.
Howard, one of the things that really bothers me when you go to political events, and I go to a lot of them, but a lot of these politicians love to say, America's the freest country in the world. What you just described is not a free country. This is a country that is literally enslaved by debt. We've lost the purchasing power of the dollar, as you said, and we almost seem to be like living in a Brave New World scenario where they keep the people kind of sedated, kind of happy with the bread and circus, as it were. But the reality is we are all slaves here.
Yeah, it's a slavery system. And, in the study, we break it down at artofliberty.org/inflation to where it's over 40 years worth of work. So the components, when you add up the components, and I'll just break down the components for you. So part of it is just the pure inflations, the loss of purchasing power of the dollars that you earn and save. They should be going up. So in an honest monetary system under, when we had the gold standard and we used the time period from about 1880 to 1896 as kind of like our baseline, prices were benignly deflationary. And the purchasing power of the gold-backed dollar and the silver-backed dollar was actually going up, and it was kind of transmitting the savings from innovation and productivity improvements. And so so your purchasing power was actually buying more and more and more every year, which is really obviously the way it should be as businesses figure out how to use less fuel with jet engines, and now we've got trucks that haul 2 or 3 trailers behind them on the roads, and we've got shipping. They've actually got a sail that they can put on tankers and ocean going vessels like aftermarket, and reduces the amount of fuel that you need for the voyage. And you can just think of all the different ways that business has been able to get the cost out of either the manufacturing or the distribution of things. And so your dollar should be buying more and more every year, but your dollar is buying less and less because these banks are able to issue their own money. The banks are creating money out of thin air. When you go to a bank to get a mortgage, when you go to a bank to get a car loan, or when you borrow on your credit card, they're not loaning you depositor money. They just tickle the ivories. They credit your account with these digital dollars, even though that's inflationary, and even though that's stealing the value out of your money. And then they've bought up the media, and they've bought up the government, and they force you to go to this mandatory government school, or these government affiliated rip-off universities and colleges where they're not going to teach you why that's happening. The media and the college professors pretend that inflation is caused by fairies that show up at night and sprinkle pixie dust on price tags and gas pumps, and it just magically, inflation is something that just magically happens. Whereas if you were to ask any, economist, they're going to tell you that that's a monetary phenomenon that's caused by creating too many of these dollars. You can think of the dollar, the example I give is if I have $1 and your listener has $1, and I have 50% of the world's wealth, and the listener has 50% of the world's wealth. We own the only $2 in the world, and a bank or a government comes along and creates $2 additional using fractional reserve banking or quantitative easing or a printing press or digital dollar creation, whatever it is. Now, all of a sudden, me and the listener have been reduced to owning 25% of the world's wealth, and the bank or the government has stolen 50% of the world's wealth. Now multiply that by a gazillion dollars, and you understand where that $2.7 million comes from. But the stealing the value out of the money is only one of the ways where how that theft is produced. Because when the banks and when the government are allowed to create hundreds of billions of dollars at a time, there's two more, economic mechanisms that fuel the theft of that system. And one of them is called the cotillion effect, which is a 300-year-old, law of economics where an economist, Richard Cotillion, noticed that when these dollars come into being, they tend to benefit the people that get them first, and that is that's kind of best identified in our situation is after the COVID and after the great financial collapse of 2008, they pumped trillions of dollars into the system. And then they gave that came into, through bills, bonds, notes, the Fed buying its own issuances. It came into the primary dealers. And then the financial industry began buying houses that had been wrecked. So people were, the economy went into the toilet because of Wall Street shenanigans. Wall Street then, in partnership with the government, creates hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. Wall Street gets it first. They begin buying single-family homes. They bought over 450 single-family homes by 2022. It jacks the price of single-family homes through the roof. They buy them in bulk through a government program called REO to retail. Okay, and now the average person has to number one, so they crank the value of that asset through the roof so that they benefit. And now if you wanted to buy that same asset, the cost is called the cotillion effect. And then the third component is called the compound trap. And now you've got to borrow from the same banks that cranked up the price of housing to be able to buy a house, or you've got to rent at an amount of rent that is now 2x or 3x what it would have been if they hadn't cranked the price of the homes through the roof. And so that's just three of the mechanisms that we're covering in this new report that we call the greatest theft in history, showing how the government and the banks are extracting this money from the population, where they wouldn't have to borrow, or they wouldn't have to borrow as much to be able to get in a home. They wouldn't have to borrow as much for college. They wouldn't have to borrow from the banks for healthcare. They wouldn't have to do, there's a lot of this money, is going directly to the banks that are causing the problem and are stealing the value out of your money to begin with, in addition to the value that they're stealing out of your money.
Within the greater conservative movement, I would say we've had this enemy that we've identified. Obviously George Soros was one of them, but the World Economic Forum was a big one. Formerly led by that James Bond villain, which he literally looked like a James Bond villain. But he was honestly just saying the quiet part out loud. He was telling us we'd own nothing and we'd be happy. And that's exactly what's happening, not just in America, but around the world. They have, through the taking away the purchasing power of the dollar, they have ensured that we would be slaves. But now they're moving into that next phase where we quite literally will be incapable of owning anything.
So we have an organized crime system. I mean, it's organized crime at the top. I think it's the banks at the top, and I think it's the the Rothschild Rockefeller banking empire for a variety of reasons that we can get into. But I'll just sum it up. And these banks are creating money out of thin air, and they're buying the world with the little digital dollars and little paper tickets that they create out of nothing. And they're buying up and they're providing kind of unlimited capital to certain favored companies to buy up and consolidate their industry. And this is what's ending up as the Fortune 500 and the Fortune 100. And it's not capitalism. It's not free market. It's not what you would see absent this crooked monetary system. It is an organized crime cartel, waging a kind of economic warfare against the population. The World Economic Forum, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, these are organizations that they're taking the CEOs of companies that have been stolen with fractional reserve dollars, have been bought up and consolidated with this dishonest money, and they're providing a forum to organize these companies and these C-level executives and the reporters and the producers and the editors of the media that they've bought up and monopolized as well into these organizations where they're meeting on a regular basis in secure facilities that have been swept by bugs, because if you're going to run the world, you got to have meetings. And these are the institutions that allow them to have meetings in secure, on a regular basis in secure facilities where they're given their marching orders. And one of the things that we do, my best known book is a book called, Government, the Biggest Scam in History. And the subtitle of that book is How Intergenerational Organized Crime Runs the Government, the Media, and Academia. And that really is the kind of the big secrets, the government and the media working together. And the most powerful weapon on the planet isn't the hydrogen bomb, it is control of perception. Can we get you to believe that you're not a free and independent human being, but you're an American or a Canadian, and because of this imaginary line, you now owe money to this capital city, and it's your duty to pay, and it really is. They're creating a kind of artificial tribe. They're leveraging the behavioral psychology of human beings, the need to want to participate in the tribe, and then they're, what we break down in the book is that they're selling that idea to the population as a kind of pseudo religion called statism, which is the belief in having a state and having a ruling class, so that they can be tax farmed and robbed and controlled. But the most powerful weapon that makes that possible is the control of perception, and that is the monopolization of the media, and that is the algorithmic censorship of what I call the DARPA internet. We can pump up certain voices, we can turn down other voices, we can shadow ban, completely, we can demonetize, we can de-index, we can turn, at the same time we can turn up controlled opposition voices, so that all you ever see on every single channel is government is legitimate, government is legitimate, government. Not only is government legitimate, but government's the hero. And so, the Defense Department has an office in Hollywood, 1,000 movies, 1,000 television shows. Anytime you see anything that has military equipment or, a shot on an aircraft carrier, or if they're using F-16s or they're using Chinooks or they're using Blackhawks or whatever it is, the Pentagon has script control over that movie. In some cases, they're rewriting history, and the directors understand that not only is, if the government's not the hero and the CIA isn't saving the day from nukes cooking off in cities around the world, you don't get the equipment. There's a well understood kind of quid pro quo. And then the kind of dirty secret of Hollywood is their product placing the American flag at moments of high positive emotion in the television shows and in the movies, so that it's a marketing technique known as anchoring, to where they'll build up the movie to a moment of high positive emotion, and then they'll show you the flag, and then they'll show you the flag, and then they'll show you the flag. And so in my book, To See the Cage is to Leave It, 25 Techniques the Few Use to Control the Many, I break down a lot of these kind of unethically manipulative techniques that the government is using on the population to get them to self-identify as an American. It's been decided for you. And to get you to buy into the legitimacy of government, the necessity of government, the desirability of having a government, even though that's not an ironclad law of the universe, and even though we'd all be dramatically wealthier and have much more prosperity and live in much more harmony without government. But those are ideas that are never, ever, ever presented either in the government school or in the monopoly media.
I got to tell you, I think for some of the audience, you're blowing their minds, but you are absolutely 100% spot on. I mean, Rockefeller thanked the media, a very, very famous speech where he thanked the media for being quiet, that they wouldn't have been able to get as far as they were with their plans if the media actually would have been doing their jobs. And even when you're talking about Hollywood there and how they use the flag, they build a crescendo of music and everything. You're feeling really positive, and there's the backdrop of the flag. As you were talking about that, I was reminded of the assassination or attempted assassination of Donald Trump, where during an active shooting scene, the flag, the crane comes over and drops the flag. So when he's saying fight, 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 I mean, it was iconic, right? And what did it do? It got everybody to believe in the government, to look at it and say, oh, look, they're the power. I got to tell you, Howard, I don't think it's an accident. I didn't plan this, but I'm wearing my Obey shirt from They Live. I've got the right there. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of perfect. Bob Ross, happy little accident right there. I want you to talk about, because I want to shock the vast majority of my audience. The vast majority of my audience is going to be on that conservative Republican spectrum, even though I'm very open and tell them all the time I refer to myself as a biblitarian, so they know I'm a Christian libertarian. But can you talk a little bit about how the Republican Party is doing the exact same thing? Everything that you're talking about here, the Republican Party has its hands in, because most of my audience is going to say, the Democrats, they're the bad ones. The Republicans, they're the good side. That's not the case.
Right. So, I mean, the first thing I'd say is, so it's an organized crime system. It's illegitimate on its face. Like, the number one thing to understand is you cannot have a legitimate government. It is impossible to have a moral, legitimate government. And when I say that, you can't be bound by a social contract that you did not sign. So unless you personally sign the Constitution, you're not really bound by it. It's impossible to delegate a right that you do not possess, that the population does not possess themselves. So if Caleb does not have the ability to make up rules for his neighbor, or steal his neighbor's money and redistribute it in charity or good works or whatever, then Caleb cannot, delegate a right he does not possess himself to a representative or to a government to exercise on his behalf. And if my fiance and I can't vote to rob you because there's two of us and one of you, then it doesn't matter if there's three of us. It doesn't matter if there's 10 of us. It doesn't matter if there's 200 million. And so that's why my book is called the biggest scam in history, is because it's been the biggest scam in all of human history.
And Howard, that is I got to pause you. That's a great little teaser. The biggest scam in history, government right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we hit that hard break. This is Caleb Collier with Church and State. Are you tired of your device spying on you? Ladies and gentlemen, we live in 1984. Your phones, your tablets, your smart televisions, they all are spying on you. And this is why I heavily endorse Mark37.com. This is everything you need for your digital privacy. Phones, tablets, laptops, all of them are ghost protocoled. So that means that you are in charge of your own data. Just go to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, and hit mark37.com for all of your privacy needs. Make sure to use that promo code Church and State. And we are back. Thank you for staying with us. You're over at churchandstate.media, and I can't wait to go back to my guest. But real quick, I got to plug one of our awesome affiliates. And Chris reminded me right before the show that we have the new one finally up. And so we have My Favorite Vegetarian. Sorry, Chris. I know that's offensive to you, but My Favorite Vegetarian, great guy. All right, we've got Dr. Lewis. If you are concerned about your cognitive health, this guy has some incredible stuff there. It's like there's, as he explained it to me, there's multiple versions of sugar. This is a very complex sugar that they're deriving from the aloe vera plant, and he's been able to test it on people with MS, people that are having issues with Alzheimer's, and having dramatic effects. So I want you guys to check this stuff out. It's a new affiliate for us, but just go to it, Dr. Lewis, and use the promo code Church and State. I also will remind you one more time to please hit the donate button for us so that we can continue to have conversations like this one at Church and State, because it's so vital that we continue to explore liberty, explore the ideas of actually living free without the confines of government intrusion. So please hit the donate button for us. All right, with that, let's go back to our guest, the Art of Liberty Foundation. I'm not even going to try the pen name. So I'm joined by Howard Lichman once again. Howard, thanks for staying with us, and I'm sorry that I had to interrupt, but you know how it goes.
I do, and it was funny because it was like, what a cliffhanger. Government has been the greatest scam in history, and number one, it's illegitimate on its face. It's impossible to have a legitimate moral government, and so it is being run in Washington, D.C., and whether you believe that or not, and I know that there's been a lot of mythology that has been built up around the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and everything like that, but I think the one thing that our audience can agree on is that no matter whether you believe in having a government or not having a government, that the government in Washington, D.C. is being run as a criminal enterprise. And there are hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars that are going out the back door to very identifiable groups that are then, spending money to install and the government that we have right now. We talked a little bit before we got started about AIPAC and about so if the banks are stealing have stolen 15 to 25 trillion dollars since 1913, as we described in kind of the first part of the interview. Who are they installing and who's behind that? And the number one banking family, the two biggest banking families out there are the Rothschild banking family, which essentially invented central banking and have controlled the currencies of nations going back, across, 5 different countries. Meyer Rothschild had, 5 sons and sent them off to, create a banking dynasty and became essentially the first international, banking system where they were able to transfer currency and create lines of credit, and also begin financing governments. And so, the Rockefeller family, you mentioned, the quote of David Rockefeller about the media keeping the secret of them, building an international, supranational, organization using the Council on Foreign Relations, using the Trilateral Commission, which has been, meant to bring together Europe and Asia Pacific with the United States in an integrated system. And these organizations were financed by, the Rockefellers, who David Rockefeller was the chairman of Chase National Bank, which is now J.P. Morgan Chase. There's been a lot of mergers and pieces of it, but that he was a banker. He established the Council on Foreign Relations. He established the Trilateral Commission. The World Economic Forum is an offshoot of the Council on Foreign Relations, and so the Council on Foreign Relations was the original organization that penetrated the cabinets. And it penetrated the cabinet in the United States. And one of the things that I do in my book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, is I have organization charts that show, going back decades, through multiple administrations, whether it's Democrat or Republican administrations, going back decades, every major position of power in the United States has been held by somebody that was either a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, or the Bilderberg Group, or 2 of those, or in many cases, all 3 of those organizations. Jeffrey Epstein was a member of all three of those organizations to give you an idea of how that worked. And if you're going to rob the world, you've got to have meetings. And these are, again, the organizations that allow them to have meetings. But going back decades through the presidency, the vice presidency, cabinet officials, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, major university presidents, you can see in one of the charts that we actually have a poster-sized copy that you can get of artofliberty.org/store or artofliberty.org/white-rose. We've got a variety of these posters where we're using visualization to make something that was invisible now visible. And so what you can do with visualization is you can take something like, if you didn't understand that these people were populating, every single major power center going back decades through Republican and Democratic administrations, okay, a visualization can actually bring that, and you're like, holy crap, they've owned every major power center in the United States going back decades through Republican and Democratic administrations. And so that really has been the big scam. And whether at the top, there's tons of good Republicans out there. There might even be a couple of good Democrats. But at the top of these political parties and these levels, these are installed, henchmen for this organized crime system. And if you take a look at the policies of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, objectively, they're fighting over kind of football issues that are, might be important to, one part of the conservative base. But both Joe Biden and Donald Trump are 100% aligned on everything important to the real rulers of this country. They're 100% aligned on hiding the Epstein files. They're 100%
I got to tell you,
aligned.
Howard, you literally just threw a bucket of ice water on so much of the audience right there to say that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are 100% aligned on what truly matters to their handlers, to the people actually in charge.
Yeah.
That is an awesome statement. I'm so glad you said that, because I've been literally pulling my hair out. I don't want to pull my hair out, but I've been pulling my hair out trying to convince people of this very fact.
No. Well, let's break it down. Let's break it down for them. They are 100% aligned on transferring trillions of dollars to private banks and private companies through the TARP and the TALF and the quote-unquote bailouts. They're 100% aligned on stealing the value out of your dollar through fractional reserve banking. They're 100% aligned on wars for Israel. They're 100% aligned on hiding the Epstein files. They were both 100% aligned on the COVID. They were both 100% aligned on getting an experimental vaccination, quote-unquote vaccine that is proved to be harmful and have all kinds of heart issues and fertility issues and things like that, into the public's veins. They're 100% aligned on confiscatory taxation, estate taxes. They were 100% aligned on the warfare, the economic warfare of lockdowns. They're 100% aligned. We can keep going down the list, but like that right there, that there's probably 8 or 9 that you're like, wait a minute, I'm against every single one of those things, and yet Donald Trump is for every single one of those things. And so it really has been a scam that they've been able to get away with because they have this media system where the vast majority of the controlled opposition voices and the monopoly media are pretending that it's legitimate. Number one, that there is a government. They're pretending that it's legitimate, that the elections aren't rigged when they're obviously rigged. I believe that they threw the election to Joe Biden. 100% Trump won in 2020, but not for the reasons that people thought. They threw it to Biden because they wanted to keep Biden in for 4 more years so he could leave the borders open so that Trump could come in as the populist strongman for the next phase that they'd already whiteboarded what's going on with Iran. They'd already whiteboarded, goons on the street through ICE. They'd already figured out what the policies were. and they knew the military and the domestic law enforcement, federalized law enforcement, wouldn't go along with it under Biden. So they threw the election to Biden 100%. But Trump's in on it, and it was for the purpose of so that he could star in the next season of government, and that's where we are now. And the cast, they're so zany, it's crazy. Like, it's truly unbelievable. But it's a television show, and Trump's not making decisions. Biden's not making these decisions. These are political puppets that are forced to put on a suit and a tie and go and read off a teleprompter and do the business of getting things done. They got to go to work every day. I think Trump's been a propped up billionaire until he got to the presidency and began stealing money through the presidency and things like that. But I think that they've had him by the short hairs ever since 1991. A lot of people don't realize this. The Rothschild family bailed out Trump in 1991 when all of his casinos went bust, and his debt was restructured by Rothschild Incorporated. And the head of the bankruptcy refinancing group at Rothschild Inc. was Wilbur Ross, who went on to be the Secretary of Commerce in the first Trump administration. And Wilbur Ross very famously said, when they restructured, when they debt and provided fresh financing, he said, the star power of Trump leads me to believe that that he's going to be the casinos are going to have kind of more ability with his star potential at the top. And so I think they realized they had a guy that had charisma and had some and so then other Zionists, so the Rothschild family, they famously created the State of Israel. Yeah. The Balfour Declaration is a very famous historical English document where the English government essentially writes to Lord Rothschild and says, "Hey, we're giving you Palestine." Okay, and they gave what they had been administering in a kind of colonial system to the Zionist movement that was being financed by the Rothschilds. And so why would bankers that are running a organized crime banking system, why would they want to have their own country? Because having your own country gives you diplomatic immunity. Mm-hmm. And now you can move around the chessboard, and your documents and your hard drives and your communications and everything like that can now be hidden in a way that you couldn't do without having diplomatic immunity. Now you have a base of operations. Now you have you have freedom from extradition. So there's not an extradition agreement with the United States. A lot of Israelis have been convicted of crimes in the United States and have gone to Israel to serve their sentences. And you have the ability to receive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars through foreign aid and reparations. And so the amount of foreign aid that the United States has transferred to Israel since 1948 has been over $300 billion in 2025 dollars. And then that doesn't even count all of the money and the technical assistance and the intelligence that we've given Israel. It doesn't count. We give them obsolete weapons systems. We've given them over $6 billion of obsolete weapons systems. We gave them a squadron of F-15 fighters in 1992. We're still flying the F-15 today, so we're giving them billions of dollars in obsolete weapons.
Sounds very
equipment.
Obsolete, yeah.
Very, very obsolete. 3 of them just got shot down fighting a war for Israel. A couple weeks ago, and so this is so now they install Trump. First of all, they create the legend around Trump, and I believe he was swept up in what's in Washington D.C. I used to live in Northern Virginia. I used to be a member of the largest CEO networking group, in Northern Virginia, Washington D.C., and Maryland. And in Washington, D.C., the operation that Jeffrey Epstein was running is known as a brownstone operation. And that name comes from, I don't know if you remember Barney Frank, who was a member of Congress that was running a similar operation out of his brownstone, where he had a gay callboy service, creating blackmail material on other members of Congress and prominent people within, the Washington, D.C. political scene. And so that became known as a brownstone operation. But Epstein was obviously being handled by Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was probably the most famous spy that Israel ever had until Maxwell and Epstein came along. But essentially, she learned this operation at the knee of Maxwell. Maxwell was when he died, his funeral was attended by a sitting prime minister of Israel, an ex-prime minister of Israel, the president of Israel, the head of the Mossad, which is the CIA of Israel, and 5 other retired heads of Mossad. And so not a regular guy. And then his daughter pops up running almost the exact same operation. Epstein's #1 client, Les Wexner. Les Wexner's wife, Abigail Wexner, is the daughter of one of the co-founders of the Mossad. So that's where the money's coming from. What are they doing? They're buying and blackmailing and controlling people within the United States that are then transferring over $500 billion to Israel. So it's been $300 billion plus in pure aid. And so again, they created so they've got him by the balls after the bankruptcy restructuring, and after they bailed him out, and after they provided fresh financing and restructured all of his debts. They had him swept up in the Epstein brownstone operation going back decades, when Epstein and Trump were friends and hanging out together and doing God knows what in New York City. And then along comes Ari Emanuel. And Ari Emanuel was Trump's theatrical agent, and Ari Emanuel is the brother of Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel was the chief of staff for for Obama during the Obama administration. He became the mayor of Chicago. He was an elected representative in the House of Representatives. He was a Goldman Sachs banker. And his brother is one of the top agents in Hollywood. He's the character that Ari Gold in Entourage, in the television series and movie Entourage, is based on. And Ari Emanuel creates the legend in intelligence parlance of Trump being a competent businessman. They give him media training. They give him the show The Apprentice. They give him a national stage with the pageants and with the worldwide wrestling and with, appearances in movies like Home Alone 2 and, everything that Trump was doing. Now all of a sudden you see his face everywhere. So they put him on the monopolized media. They create the legend around Trump. And then they come around and they pump in just one donor, the Adelsons, Miriam and Sheldon Adelson, who are Zionist casino magnates and are billionaires, Zionist billionaires. They have provided Trump over $420 million across 3 election cycles. So 2016, 2020, and 24, just from the Adelsons alone, it's been $420 million. They install him. Starting in, so we were giving the government of Israel $3.1 billion a year in 2016 when Trump took over. Within 2 years, that gets cranked up to $3.8 billion a year, so up $700 million. What do they get for their investment? Well, they crank it up. Sleepy Joe gives them an additional $17 billion in 2024 on his way out the door that Trump distributes in 2025 and 2026. And now we're waging the 300 billion is kind of that 3.1 to 3.8 billion dollars a year that I mentioned, and all the other billions that came before it going back to 1948. But then if you include us fighting the Houthis, if you include us fighting for Israel and Yemen, if you include the first, bombing raid, and you include what we're doing now in Iran, where we have no business in being, in Iran right now, that is projected to be an additional $200 billion in both the hard costs of the weapon systems and the munitions that we're expending, and the crashed F-15s and the aircraft and everything like that. But also now the American consumer is paying crazy jacked up prices for oil, and so they're milking the American consumer. They've been caught in doing insider trading on the stock market and energy price fluctuations that this campaign was guaranteed to generate. And so it really is, now you're looking at spending, in addition to what they spent on Trump. AIPAC alone, another identifiable group, is spending over $125 million a year to install members in Congress. And if you take a look at the members that take AIPAC money, it's 3 times the amount of members that don't take AIPAC money. So AIPAC, if AIPAC was a political party in the Congress of the United States, it would be a larger political party than the Republicans and the Democrats by a factor of 3. So they're installing politicians in the United States. Those politicians are voting to send, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars back to Israel. And we're at over $500 billion. And that is a country that was essentially founded by one of the banking families that is behind the theft of the 15 to 25 trillion that they've already stolen from 1913 till now. And that's what's going on. And all you got to do is follow the money. And it's a huge amount of money. And we're talking, like I said, like Israel alone has gotten over $500 billion easy.
I got to tell you, Howard, I was originally going to call this show The Art of Liberty, but I think we're going to change the name to Blackpilled with Howard Lichman, because you literally have dunked the audience in truth, and some of them might not be ready for it, but this has been absolutely phenomenal. It's not, I interview a lot of people, and over the years I've interviewed a ton of different people. It's not very often where I am like, I completely agree with everything that they are saying. And you are one of those guests. So I say this a lot to people, like, I got to have you back, but I am going to have you back. Like, I need you to be like a reoccurring guest on Church and State, because I love what you were doing. We've actually ran a little bit long. I didn't want to stop you because that was absolutely phenomenal. But I do want to push the 2 websites here that I have. Number one, artofliberty.org. And you were talking about that poster. I think I'm on it right now. Is that the White Rose individual poster?
If you go to the White Rose, you'll see we have a whole variety of posters. But like I said, we do visualizations. If you try and explain to your friends and family that there are 6 companies running hundreds of subsidiaries in the media, they may or may not believe you. But if you show them a media ownership chart, then all of a sudden they're like, holy crap, there's 6 companies running hundreds of subsidiaries, to give everybody the illusion that there's all these choices in the media. And that's the power of visualization. And that's what I do with the books, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, To See the Cages, To Leave It. It's not like I know a lot of your audience probably know exactly what we're talking about. But it's the best way to wake up your friends and your family. My book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, has been the best-selling book at over 24 plus Liberty conferences and events. It's become one of those rare titles that people are buying in 5s and 10s. Over 10% of our sales are friends bundles, 5 and 10 packs. So people are donating them to libraries. They're giving them to friends and family, because it can wake somebody up in a way that a text-only book won't. And that's kind of the magic of what we're doing, is you got to see it with your own eyes. And when you see it with your own eyes, you come to that deeper understanding. You come to that moment of insight. And so that's what I do. I wake people up to how the system really works by letting them see how it works with their own eyes.
Well, my wife, I'm just going to let you know, I'm going to be ordering a number of these books. So you're going to see a number of charges that are coming. Sorry, I have to, because I love this stuff. And I hope the audience does as well, as this is stuff that we have to be reading. Like I said, absolutely blackpilled here on today's episode. Howard, I got to close this out, but I pushed the website, so we're good there. But just any last statements for the audience here?
No, I mean, freedom is important. We've got to get this parasite of government off our back. We need to be free. Freedom is what creates the wealth and the prosperity and solves all the issues that we have as a country. If the government hadn't stolen $2.7 million from the average person in the United States, much more for higher earners, the world would be a very, very different place. There's more than enough wine, cheese, and bread on the table for everybody if there wasn't this parasite of government stealing $2.7 million from the average person in the country. And so, we would be, that is the cost of government. That is the big scam. That's the main thing that we've got to get everybody focused on, is where did this 2.7 to, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars for higher earners, where did this money go? And I think, people are going to be shocked when they really understand how it was done. And then the final plug is that's at artofliberty.org/inflation. You can download, you can get that report. All 4 large language models, all 4 AIs have converged and agree with our math. That's not just me saying that. That's every single large language model, and you can actually replicate it. You can ask it. We explain the prompts. We give you the methodology. You can check our work. You can check our math. That's not just me saying it. That's there's a lot of economics, and we're using the government's own numbers. We're using Federal Reserve data. We're using the BLS's, CPI. We're showing you what the alternatives are too. But we're using government data to cut. It's not that we just made that up out of our, out of our heads. You're going to be shocked at how much they've stolen from you.
All right. Well, there you go, audience. You have got your homework right there. Howard, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on. Like I said, I'm going to have to close this out, but if you'd hold on one more minute post-production to say our goodbyes, I'd appreciate it. But I thank you for your time, for your work, for really promoting liberty and trying to bring the people out of slavery.
Thanks, Gabe. And thank you for what you do as well.
Thank you, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you go. Talk about being blackpilled. That is so much information. I believe you might have to rewatch this show. You might have to pause it during times and take notes. But I tell you, get to artofliberty.org and start exploring it yourself, because I always tell you, don't believe me, don't believe my guest. Do your own research and come to the conclusion that we're living under a stolen system. Church and State is brought to you in part by Colonial Life Spokane Independent Agents, Finders Insurance, and Mark37.com. I'm Caleb Collier. I was born for a storm.
Welcome to the fire.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier with the Church and State Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I want all of you to go to Galileo.com. You need to stay connected no matter what comes our way. Whether it's government intrusion or a meteor falling from the sky, Galileo has you connected. As a Marine veteran, I can tell you that communications is essential. Galileo has you connected. Whether it's worldwide coverage, uncensored content, or real-time alerts, Galileo is going to make sure that you're connected with your friends, family, and neighbors. Just head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, and hit Galileo.com. Make sure to ask them for a free bivvy stick, and make sure to use that promo code Church and State. This is Caleb Collier with churchandstate.media. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not sleeping on my pillow, do you even patriot? I got to tell you, this is the most wonderful stuff from a man who's given it all for your freedoms. Whether it be the pillow, the sheets, or the slippers, I absolutely adore My Pillow. My Pillow has the greatest products around. I know when I want to shuffle around in my bathrobe and slippers and yell at the neighbors, of course I'm buying from My Pillow. I need you to head on over to churchandstate.media, scroll over to shop, because every single time that you purchase any of these products using the promo code Church and State, you ensure that we keep our message out on the air.
I thank everybody for your support in using promo code Church and State. You guys go to mypillow.com/Church and State too, and then you get your own little platform right there, everybody.
Hey, this is Caleb Collier, and I know you're excited for the Church and State podcast. Now, as a Christian patriot, I love precious metals, whether it's gold, silver, palladium, and of course, lead. And this is why I want you to go over to Ponderay Ballistics, don't ask me how to spell it, for all of your ammunition needs. Remember, that's PENDOREILLE ballistics.com for all of your ammunition needs. I want you to head on over to churchandstate.media/shop, go to Ponderay Ballistics, and have a shooting good time.